Today I'm in the middle of a central business district area in Singapore. It's a bit weird. I usually avoid places like this when I film just because I don't like being in the energy um, of, on a weekday being around people during their lunch hours, going about just, busy at work, right? But it feels like it's appropriate to what I wanted to talk about today, so that's why I'm here today. But I am on a swing, which is. Yeah. Anyway, so I wanted to talk about, I guess, three main forms of thinking about work versus life or work versus retirement, which is, kind of a bit of a false dichotomy in itself because work and life are not like separate things, not the way that I suppose we are used to thinking about it in terms of like, like work-life balance. So anyway, let me just talk about the three main types of work/life balance that I want to talk about today. So the first is what we will call a 9 to 5, which basically just means like a job that takes up most of your days, 5 days of a week, and you just, get 2 days off every 7 days. After working every 5 days, something like that. So 9 to 5, which in today's context usually means more hours than actually just from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. The second one is one that came about. So I should mention that 9 to 5 is kind of like, even today, the predominant form of employment that most of us are familiar with. And then the second one is FIRE, which I at least came into contact with it around like 2018, maybe, like when I first started working and like slightly before the COVID pandemic hit. So FIRE basically stands for financially independent and retire early. So it is kind of this idea of well, I suppose it takes many forms, but the common form that it tends to take is people, I guess, hustling, like grinding, working really hard in their early years, from like 20 something until 30 something, 40 something even. But the point is that you want to retire early, so you try to earn all the money that you need up front so that you can, finish all the work that you need to do to get the money that you want so that you can live after that. So that's kind of like, I guess, the first immediate broad retaliation to the status quo of 9 to 5. Of course, I'm aware that, like, even within all this context, there are other forms of work and life and employment, but these are, broadly speaking, the common ones that I guess I'm familiar with. And the third one I want to talk about today is this idea of like mini retirements, or sometimes also called adult gap years, fun employment. Basically, the idea is that somewhat building upon the idea of FIRE, of where you kind of work a bit and then you rest. For mini retirement, instead of doing that as the span of your whole life, like you work fully and then you rest fully. It's kind of like you work a bit, you rest a bit, you work a bit, you rest a bit, and so on until the end of your life. So why I wanted to talk about these three ideas of like work and life today is kind of because I guess I've come to realize that not everybody's really encountered well, I suppose people have possibly encountered this, but to have a bit more of a personal, like my own personal story of where I went through with all of this, because I'm at a point where I'm more in the camp of like whatever I want to do with my life is closer to the idea of like what mini retirement kind of maps out, although I won't say for sure that it is going to look exactly like that. It's just that as an initial framework, that would be the first one that is easiest to stick to. So like I said, it's a personal journey. So I started when I was young, thinking that when I grow up I'll be an adult and then I'll do like a regular job like everybody else, 9 to 5. Except that's not what we called it here. But anyway, so that's what I thought I'd do, and then I thought, the main point of it would just be that I will earn money and then I get to do whatever I want during the weekends. And I did that for a while. After I graduated, I did that for 4.5 years, thereabouts. And during that period of time, I really started to wonder, like, is this what I want out of my life? Is this what I want to keep doing day in, day out for like until I'm like 60, 70, whatever the retirement age is by the time I actually get to retire in Singapore? Because the retirement age keeps going up. But yeah, then I was like, mid-20s, 25 or so then. And then I was like, is this really what I want to do for the rest of my life? And the answer is obviously no, even though it took a lot of time and courage to be able to voice that. Because I think even during that period of time where FIRE was really coming up as a trend, right? It wasn't easy to be like, to reject the idea that most people are comfortably living out, which is you go to a job, you go to your 9 to 5, you get money, you go back, you relax with your friends, whatever it is. And the fact that I was doing pretty well for myself in that framework made it feel like I was being a hypocrite by being unhappy in it. Like, it made it feel like I wasn't grateful. And I think now I'm at a point where I can say I am grateful for, like, the things that I've learned from it, the time I had to build up my own financial management skills, my own personal finance, to actually amass like savings during that time. Like, I'm grateful for all of that, but I won't say I'm particularly grateful for how I felt during that time. Like, the experience of me being in a 9 to 5 was a trial, to say the least. Like, I genuinely didn't, like, if I thought of myself continuing in that state for 20 something years, I just, like, it didn't feel like it was a life particularly worth living, which is morbid, I guess, but it kind of puts into perspective, right? Like, you can't think about life without thinking about death, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that. So, like, the fact that, like, this life was so, like, not for me to the point where I thought, like, it wasn't worth living was, well, I mean, it said what it needs to be said for itself, right? So for a period of time after that, I quit my job then, and then I went into 1 year of what I then called my adult gap year. You can call it a fun employment. I've called it a fun employment before. You can also call it a mini retirement, whatever you want to call it. So prior to that, I came into, about 2 years before I took that fun employment, I came into the idea of FIRE, financially independent, retire early. And I thought, like, sure, why not? Why not do that? I wasn't sure to 100% whether that was the idea for me. And sorry, I'm just like looking at this like black chicken walking past. Anyway, so I wasn't sure whether it was gonna be the idea for me, but I knew that, like, there was something in it that I liked. So I thought about that, and then I did all the things that would put me in a good place with regards to that. So things like saving, investing, managing my money, tracking my expenses, practical steps that you can take that, if you just go and search what FIRE, how to do FIRE, you would learn, right? And so I did those steps, and I was in my fun employment period. And even throughout the period where I was in 9 to 5, up to this point where I was in this fun employment period, um, I grappled with the question of what do people actually do when they retire? Like, what do I want to do when I retire? What do other people want to do when they retire? And to me, the question was, I guess, personally relevant in light of the fact that my parents were also retired during that time. Like, my dad did a 9 to 5 job for like his whole life, basically. I mean, not one job, but like he did some form of 9 to 5 jobs, right? And then he retired about the same time that I started working initially. And I think the thing that really spurred me into this idea of like wondering what do people or what do I even want to do when I do retire, right? Which like most people would just tell you, like, you get to live your life, you get to finally live your life, you know, like as if that is the reward that you get after you slog like whether 60 something years if you do 9 to 5 or like 20 intense years if you do FIRE. Whatever that is, right? The retirement is meant to be your reward at the end of the rainbow, the pot of gold at the end of a rainbow. But it felt hollow. It felt weird when I actually came down to it. So there were a few things. So around the same time that I got to know about FIRE, which was like around 2018, 2019, I took a vacation with my family to go to the UK, right? Anyway, to go to a few places in Europe. The location itself is not so important. What is important is the fact that this is the first ever family vacation that we've ever taken. Because in order to raise us, my parents were very frugal with their money. We never had passports, basically. We never traveled overseas when we were younger, which I can't really say whether it's a common Singapore experience, but it is not a common experience amongst the classmates that I was with in the more elite schools, I would say. So anyway, but I'm aware that like a lot of Singaporeans don't get to travel when they are young. Like, the point of it was, to me, it was a new experience, right? I've never seen my family outside of the context of our daily living. And when we were overseas, it suddenly struck me that, one, my parents were obviously older. And so things like physical things that we take for granted are much harder for them. So when I traveled with my friends, I got used to the idea of like, so I did like grad trips, I did a short stint overseas, like studied overseas for a short period of time. So during those times I traveled, and my siblings also traveled during their respective study periods, right? And we all have our own experience of traveling, but being young 20-something year olds, our experience of traveling is more of the type of schedule packed travel of those days. Like, you would at minimum hit up like 2 to 3 attractions in one day. You would eat like lunch, dinner, supper, tea breaks. I don't know how many meals. Like, basically you are just there to try to soak in as many experiences as you can. But then I realized while traveling with my family that that was not a thing that was physically possible, because they were just like too, like their bodies couldn't take it. So we ended up going at a much slower pace of like 1 attraction a day. And then some days they didn't join us. It was just me and my siblings going out. Without them, they stayed in the Airbnb. Things like that, right? And I think the thing that like really made me pause or think was the fact that my mum really wanted to travel, like before this trip started. But the moment the trip started and she was out of her comfort zone, she was so uncomfortable with the whole change in routine, the fact that her body wasn't able to physically keep up and all that stuff, that like it was just overall not a very particularly pleasant experience for her, even though she had, you know, the expectations that most of us would have, that vacation and traveling overseas would be quite pleasant. And I just thought to myself, like, is this what I want to do? Like, is this what I want to be? Retire at 60 something, 70 something, and then like travel, because that's what other people tell me, that's what people do during their retirement, and then realize that it's not for me, because my body can't keep up. And then the alternative, right, which is FIRE, you retire at like what, 40 something, And then I was like, but what if I don't want to travel? And I think that's a thing for me, right? Like I don't personally like I like traveling, but I don't yearn to travel that much. Like honestly, I am not always a fan of the break in routine that it brings. But it brings me to the question then of if what other people do during their retirement isn't for me, what do I actually want out of retirement? And it is this question that really I'm still thinking. I'm still wondering, even as I've set my life into motion into what looks a bit more like mini retirements. So anyway, after the first fun employment period, I used up the savings that I had set aside for that fun employment period, and then I started to do another job, which is another form of 9 to 5. It's not 5 days of weekdays and then 2 days of weekends free. I usually, because it's F&B, I usually get weekdays free instead, and that's when I started to do things like this, like come out to Singapore in a while on weekdays where most people are in the office working. And it's a bit of a strange experience sometimes if you've never tried it before. It's weird to feel like you're a bit out of sync with everybody. And like that's what a mini retirement kind of is, right? Like, so anyway, I worked for 2 years and now I'm kind of in my second period of unemployment, and I'm also slowly somewhat moving out of it. Like I'm gonna find employment, part-time employment. I'm in the midst of trying to do that, and I don't know what that will bring, but that is for future me to worry about. Like right now, I just want to talk about the idea that like moving through all these phases of what work and life can look like has gotten me to really think about the idea of work versus life, because it's not even really like a versus. Like work and life are not mutually exclusive things, right? And I suppose the thing that's a bit entangled in it here is really the idea that work is what most people would equate to leading them to money. So it's, instead of like work versus life, it's kind of like paid employment versus life for the bulk of like the people that we're talking about in this context, right? And like I don't have an answer. I don't know what the real final answer is, but I think it's important for me to think about what I want to do during retirement. Have you tried thinking about what you want to do during retirement? Have you tried doing what you want to do, or what you think you want to do during retirement? Because one thing I learned from my fun employment periods is that like when I was in the job thinking I would quit and then I would do all these fun things during fun employment, what you quickly learn, and what I've also gathered from my friends who have done fun employments, is that actually you realize that you don't end up doing the things that you thought you would do. Like, just to give a few like quick examples, maybe you think that you pick back up a hobby that you've done, pick up guitar again. Maybe you think that you would like start up a new business, or you would, I don't know, just take a chill pill, relax. And then like as it turns out, right, I did none of those things. My friend didn't do much of those things either. Like you would think like I'm gonna travel with my family, cherish all this time with them, and then you don't do it because you realize, oh, actually I'm not in a place where I really feel drawn to do that. And it's only because you've given yourself that rest period, that I've given myself that rest period, that I realized that, hey, whatever I thought from a place of being in paid employment, right, what I thought would be fun, would be relaxing, would be my life, right, the things that I would enjoy doing, what I want to get out of life, is actually not what I would really realistically do. And that's something that you'll only find out when you physically experience this rest periods, right? Like what I'm saying, I guess, is that you don't really know what you want to do during your retirement until you've actually retired. And I think that is the principle in not fun employment, but in mini retirements that I like, and which I guess I am taking to heart as I go through my life. Which is that, like, sometimes you don't know what you want until you get to doing it. And then as you do it, you iterate, you learn more about yourself, you find out that maybe something you want, maybe something is that you don't. Maybe there are things that you kind of mind, but you like the overall thing as a whole, and then you just need to tweak the things that you don't like, and then you can, work it out. Like, you don't know all of this until you've actually experienced it. And I just think it's a bit of a pity to spend your whole life wishing away while you're at paid employment, at work, thinking about what you want to do with your life, and not really having the time or chance to actually try it. Like, I feel like that's not what I want my life to be about, and I don't know about you, but like I don't think that's what you want your life to be about, So anyway, so I'm gonna end this with some thoughts that I've had, some insights that I've had about myself and my work and my life, which is that I've learned that I am someone who likes work. Not work in terms of necessarily paid employment, but what I found is that I'm somebody who enjoys creating things, enjoys making things, enjoys doing things. I have always been somebody who, I guess in short, you can just say is an artist, is a creator. I've painted, I've drawn, I've written stories, I've made videos, I've taken photos. Like, it doesn't matter what medium it is, I just like to do work. And even when I was at my paid employment, I like doing the work. I mean, not all the time necessarily, but I like exerting the effort, exerting that time and energy and care into doing something that gets to go out into this world. But what I don't like is the feeling that this work was all for nothing. And I think that is the thing that kind of disillusioned me a bit about paid employment, which is that when you are in paid employment, your work is in service of somebody else's vision, is in service of somebody else's ends, and you can control for that to some extent by choosing where you work at, interviewing the company or whatever as much as they interview you. You have some control over that, but it's not like ultimately their vision will never be fully your vision, although it can come close, I suppose. So then the question is, of course, not to just outright reject other people's visions, but like to first figure out for yourself what your own vision is and what your own relationship to work is. Like, my relationship to work is actually, like, I like work. It's just the vision and values of what work I was doing, and that what it was being in service of, that it was not in service of me, that I had an issue with. And life, like, I don't see life as like being absent of work. In fact, my life is gonna be filled with work. But I think what I really want it to be filled with is work that is meaningful to me. And that is kind of why, like, to me, I'm not particularly hung up on the idea of like needing my life to go like mini retirements necessarily, as much as I think maybe a toggle between the necessary cost of like having to live in this world, so like the fact that I do need to earn money to live, but also balancing that with the idea that like my life is work, like it is creative work, it is creation, it is doing art, it is doing, like, there's a lot of doing, right? And there's a lot of being as well. And like, I don't think that is necessarily in line or opposed to work, and also all of that is also not necessarily in line or opposed to any forms of employment that you might choose to take, whether it's a 9 to 5, FIRE, mini retirement, any other forms, like whatever rocks your boat. Which is funny because I'm just like looking at myself in the video rocking on this swing. But like, yeah, I hope this video helped, gave you something to think about. if like even just one thing, I just want to leave you with there. Can't speak right now. Alright, I just want to leave you with the question of just think of yourself now. If you get to retire right now, what do you want to do? And then in the smallest step possible, the smallest achievable step possible, go and try it. That's all I have for you today. Thanks for watching. This is Kian on Option C. Bye.
Doors are closing. Next station, Tanjong Pagar.